enforce what we actually have recommended to this owner to have implemented at his property to reduce the public safety risk. What we also are able to do, and what I thought we were also here to address, is that there's individuals hanging out at some of the stores around here, like youth or something like that, and illegal activity happening on some of the corners of some of the shops around here. What we have done in the past, and we have a current case in 60 for just kind of like a Chinese food store and in their parking lot, and we haven't had much luck with the sidewalks, although we do address that with the owners of the shops and kind of like the shop malls. We haven't had much luck with the sidewalks, but if there is activity taking place inside those stores or in the parking lots or the curtilage of those stores, then we are also able to prosecute the owners of those properties as well. So, yeah, a lot of the times we get our kind of complaints through MPD, and then sometimes we get them through community members. What we specifically need, and kind of what we kind of hawk MPD for all the time, is we need a paper trail. So you can't just call us and say, oh, this is happening, or these guys are hanging out this property, there's illegal activity taking place here. We have to have like evidence, like incident reports, and that's why we say MPD has to kind of paper these things and kind of tell these things for us, so that there is activity taking place at those particular properties. So, yeah.
So, and to piggyback on that, that's why when we were talking about 911 calls and telling us if you believe that they're stashing drugs in a particular location, let us know. So the officer should be going to check that location. Obviously, we just can't go in folks' cars if we say, well, we believe they were in the car. We have to have that probable cause, which then we would have to call out a drug dog or something like that, or we have to set up OPs where we watch and see that happening ourselves, so that we can have that report or that probable cause lockup. In reference to, as you know, we have a lot of folks hanging out in front of Rose's Liquor, different other places. One of the things that I talk to the business owners about is, you'll call us, but yet you'll still sell to this person. So if I come buy something from your store and I'm out front, what can the police do at that point? I just bought merchandise from your store, and they could produce that merchandise. Not that they're drinking in public, because we will arrest for that. But a lot of folks hang out after that, and then the owner's like, well, they're hanging out in front. And I'm like, well, why are you selling to these people? They're the same people that you see every day, and you continue to take money from them, but then as soon as they hang out in front of the business for 5 minutes, you're trying to kick them on. Well, obviously, again, we don't have any loitering laws, which is unconstitutional again in the United States. But we do ask them to move on, and a lot of times we don't get any pushback. Every once in a while we'll get some pushback, but we normally don't get a lot of pushback from the guys when we ask them to move on. Yes, ma'am?
This is my first time at the meeting in a long time. But do that also go for the prosecution?
Prostitution, we strictly enforce it, especially on the West Virginia Avenue side, because I get photos from the neighbors there. And we also, again, we try to have the major narcotics come in, but what my officers do in uniform, we will go there. Normally what I would do is just sit there myself for 15, 20 minutes and tell them, you're not going to do any business today while I'm here, so you need to move on. And they're out in public. Again, they're just walking up and down the streets. So, but once we identify them, you give us a lookout for the person, we'll go out and address them, just like this guy's driving me crazy. But we can't chase cars. We cannot chase those bikes there. So. But yes, so on your West Virginia Avenue, I'll make sure you give them, anytime you see them, call us. They're, if they're on properties, and that's one of the things that we haven't seen an extensive amount on private property as much as I used to see last summer. We're finding them more in vehicles, people in the vehicles. At one time, we were able to take folks' vehicles for that, but they've changed that as well. So we can't take the John's vehicles away from them anymore. So, go ahead.
So I have a comment and two questions. So the comment that I have is that I think it's easy to presume the low-hanging fruit of drugs and prostitution, but there are other criminal activities, one of which I phoned in and we discussed at the last meeting. But there are things like truancy and fighting and other things that occur that are illegal activities on these properties that shouldn't be underestimated. The questions that I have are, one, what is the statutory parameter that prohibits you from looking at sidewalks? And two, what is the holdup with our two famous properties on Holbrook? The one on the corner of Levis and Holbrook, the house, and the slightly vacant property, because as I understand it, the owner has only evicted 80% of the building, which is the one on this side of Holbrook.
Well,
What are those holdups?
Well, it's not so much a holdup. We did go in. The building is actually secure, except for those people who live in the two apartments. But the rest of the property is secured, and whether someone's locking it from the inside, we just can't kick the door in on that. So as long as it's secure from MPD side.
Can you state the addresses?
1516 and 1520 Holbrook Street.
Holbrook, which is the apartment building on this side of Holbrook, and that was
16 and 1520.
And I raise that in the context of notice to landlords, but the other question is the sidewalks and what is the prohibition against sidewalks?
So 5th District is not actually my district, so I'm not familiar with the properties here. The individual, my colleague who is over 5D, she's actually not feeling well today, so I'm stepping in for her. I am not familiar with Holbrook, but I assume that RG might be familiar with Holbrook. But is there some type of illegal activity going on there? Like, I'm sorry, I kind of need to be caught up on that one. With regard to the right to assemble on sidewalks, DC doesn't. If you're congregating in front of somewhere on a public sidewalk, there's a First Amendment right to assemble. So MPD nor my office can just kind of say you have to leave, even if they're loitering in front of it.
The First Amendment right to assemble is not something of criminal activity, loitering, fighting, drug dealing, and smoking.
Right, and as stated, if my office gets, and if MPD can paper and show evidence that there is illegal activity happening in front of those properties, then we can go after it. If they're just standing out in front of the properties and there's residents saying, oh, well, there's these kids and they look like they're doing something illegal, then we can't do that. Well,
so that begs
sure.
the question, out of all these properties that we've been complaining about for cases of years now, like what does the paper stack look like for these? And are you guys currently tracking those?
Right.
Or you have open cases for this neighborhood now? Where's
We
that?
actually do have open cases for the neighborhood, but we're not actually allowed to formally speak on properties. I have personally worked on a property on Queen Street, and I've also worked on a property, I believe it was on 16th Street, and these were kind of essentially trap houses.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with that though. Like,
yeah.
What do you need?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you need to prop up some teeth against these properties?
So when we get complaints, we actually look at the 911 calls. So it is helpful for you all to call 911 when there is suspected criminal activity in the neighborhoods, because we do look at the reports of 911 activity to see what type of reports they are. Also, I would.
This lady, one of these two here, call every day.
Okay.
Every single day about their problems on Montella.
Except for the last 2 days.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe she took a vacation.
Yeah, no. If you just tell me those addresses, but when we receive community complaints, then we do look into it and we do try to resolve it. We also receive reports from NPD. So Sergeant here has actually reported properties to RG in our office on like things that we need to go after.
Well, my question about the sidewalks though is specific to, my question about the sidewalks though is specific to your initial presentation that there's a blanket prohibition against your prosecution of activities on sidewalks.
That wasn't what I said. What I said was we are not allowed to go after individuals just for congregating on sidewalks. If there is illegal activity taking place on sidewalks and it is reported to my office, then we are able to look into that as long as we have evidence that there is activity going on that particular sidewalk and in front of that establishment or in front of that property.
But because you don't actually go after It's the police department's jurisdiction
Well-
to go after. So we should still continue to call 911 even if we do see. I just want that clarified because there's been a lot of confusion that has come out in previous meetings, and I want to make sure that I understand that my calls, when I make them, are actually going to be acted on. I'm not going to have a responder on the other end laugh and say, why are you calling? And then it's going to actually be dealt with legally as appropriate.
Well, it's not reported to our office because we have cases all over the city, so it has to actually be reported to our office. So I'll give you our contact information. Excuse me?
What information is that?
You just call our office. It's just a general complaint, like this house, there's this going on here, and then we'll look into it and then give you a response.
I got a question up front first.
There's multiple numbers, but my colleague who is over 5D is Argetonia Weatherington, and her number is 202-727-6338.
Last four, I'm sorry.
6338.
Can you repeat that?
It's 202-727-6338.
And we're reporting, just for clarity, the information that was just shared, basically.
You're reporting that there's suspected criminal activity at a particular property. And so Argetonia will look into it, into the activity at that property. She'll look into the incident reports, and she'll pull the 911 call records, and then she'll get back to you on whether there is something that we could actually do. A lot of times without search warrants at the properties, we're not able to actually address those properties.
Let me clarify, basically. You still have to call 911. Call 911 to get the information out so that we can show up on the scene. And again, we have to have specific information. And again, we have to be able to have that evidence. If someone's smoking outside and we get there, they're not smoking, there's nothing a police officer is going to be able
I
to
guess
do.
what our argument is, just for clarity, is we've had multiple 911 calls, multiple reports, multiple years of this. So why we call OAG is not for what happened today, yesterday, or tomorrow. We have years of these incidents. So what we're trying to get to the conclusion of resolving the challenges that continue to persist. So therefore, yes, we're going to continue to call 911, but we're at the point where we're going to continue. However, what's being done about what has happened, what's been going on, and what continues to happen.
I mean, history has already been established.
Exactly. So
We need
that's
history,
where
we
we
need a
are
paper
with
trail.
OAG
A
at
paper
this stage.
trail has been established with a lot of these properties for years. And we're back to the same thing.
We need action.
So,
At this point.
what is the next step?
So the next step is
What?
complaining to us. And I'll just be clear, if the action has not taken place in the past 6 months and there's no paper trail for the past 6 months because we need evidence of recency in our office, then we're not able to pursue that
We
either.
still have that the last 6
Yeah,
months.
yeah.
This is
And that's helpful for us.
Let me finish up front. Let me finish up front.
I'm clear, if something like this,
There's a lot of ambiguity, so yeah, that's clear.
in case I see some activity, it's very helpful, because my initial reaction, if I saw some people ordering and I saw maybe some illegal activity, I call 911 if I didn't think, anyone was in imminent danger, I might call a non-emergency line or something like that. I should call 911, but I should also call the Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General, responsible, for that neighborhood, just to report that action. So if there's something that they're going to do, that they need information for recency, they'll update and, and possibly a time that the 911 call to pull that information, to have, I guess, whatever information they need for motions or warrants or whatever.
Well, the thing with the 911 calls is we see a block of 911 calls and it's classified in certain areas. So it'll be like a drug nuisance call, or there was gunshots, or on this day there was this that occurred there. So that's kind of how the 911 calls are reported to our office, and that's how we pull them. If there is illegal activity happening at a property and you're concerned that there's continuing illegal activity happening at that property, then you should call our office because we can start investigating that property.
Okay, but take me through the process. Say you have gotten this information. You've gotten the phone calls, take me through the process of what do the AG do as far as going after the owner, the steps that you take to get them to respond, get them to come to court, and if you go to court, what could we, the community, do to help you assist that this owner respond to what may be a court order or what may be, whatever the case may be. So could you kind of take us through the process after you've gotten this information, these phone calls? What is the next step?
So after we pull the 911 calls and after we pull the incident reports, usually what we have is a search warrant to assist us to show that there is certain type of criminal activity occurring at this property that's within the statute. So that's drugs, guns, or prostitution. So after we get that information, we put the owner on notice. So we send him a letter, and he's required to respond to us within 14 days. We have a meeting with him about, or him or her, about the activity that's occurring at the property. After that meeting, we try to work with the owner for maybe a period of about a month. Like we give them a certain amount of recommendations. We give them like 6 recommendations. You need to put cameras up that MPD can actually access. You need to bar these people from the property. You need to do this, you need to do that. And if within that time period they make no steps, or sometimes if it's an apartment building, we require a shop, we require them to get security to kind of push people out in front of the shop from loitering or kind of like inside the shop. If there's no actions taken within a certain amount of time, then we file a complaint and then we file a motion for a preliminary injunction.
Let's stop. You said a certain amount of time. Can you be specific, a little more specific?
It varies per owner. So we're telling owners that they have to have security for 24 hours a day at their property, then we give them sometimes a period of 6 weeks to get that together, right? But if we see within that time they don't give us quotes, they don't this, they don't that, they're not taking specific steps within maybe even 2 weeks, then we'll file a complaint and then we'll file a motion for preliminary injunction, which allows us to then have an immediate hearing within 2 weeks, and then it's essentially a trial. We have community members give affidavits. We take affidavits from MPD, and then we go to court. We bring in the community members, we bring in MPD, and then we have them testify to their experiences or what they witnessed at this property, and then thereafter the court will order certain things to take place. And so.
Was this the process you were describing? Is this what was happening with the owner of 1218?
This is what's happening now, yes.
It looks like they're trying to know the property now.
What I'll say is I'm not familiar with Sense